evening, everybody. My name is Scott Feinberg. I'm with The Hollywood Reporter, and thank you all for being here tonight. And to begin with, Sasha, I'd like to ask you, did you ever imagine you would see your life up on the big screen like this?
No,
Most journalists do not, I could say that.
No, and I mean, I never played that game of who would play you in a movie, so this whole thing has been totally surreal.
It worked out nicely, though, right? So what was the first indication that this was coming together, and actually, when did you first learn that Rachel would be you?
I found out that Rachel would be me maybe a year and a half ago, but I honestly didn't believe that the movie would get made until they showed up with cameras, you know, because I mean, there's a lot of financing hurdles to making movies, and this topic is somewhat grim, and I've said that it's not that we think of our jobs as boring, we just don't think of them as cinematic, right? I mean, we take notes, and we review documents, and we type in a computer, and we thought, if you want to try to make that interesting, good luck. And it turned out they did a really good job of making it look interesting.
Well, Tom, there haven't been all that many movies about journalism, and we remember the ones that were great for that reason. I think there's not a ton of them. What was it that drew you to this story, or maybe how did it even first cross your radar? And then what was it like getting it off the ground?
Well, first of all, thank you for all being here. It's a great turnout. Thanks again. Did you guys just clap for yourselves? I think you did. What's up, group? I will say there are actually quite a few journalism movies. They're not all good. There's some really interesting ones, and there's some crazy ones, and there's some very good ones. I think when you set out to make a movie like this, you try to forget all of them. I've seen a lot of them. I understand a lot of them as best I could, and then you kind of try to make your own movie as best you can. And I think in large part, from the very beginning in the writing, with my co-writer Josh Singer, who's out here in the house somewhere tonight, we really just tried to, don't clap for Josh. I love him, I don't know why. Where is he? He's right there, ladies and gentlemen. I think in large part we just took our inspiration from the reporters and the work they were doing. And I think very early on we understood that we were going to represent everyone involved with the story as best we could, and knew it was going to be a terrific opportunity to put together a great ensemble. And I'll say it again and again, that word ensemble is used a lot, right? But this is one of those opportunities where I think we really got to do it, and we really got to commit to it. And we had a studio behind us, an open road, that let us pursue this vision of not having a single protagonist but six, and kind of approaching the film in this way. But we also, to accomplish that, we needed actors who were willing to sign on. And any one of these people on stage, as we all know, are capable of carrying films and TV shows by themselves. But they knew what they were signing on for, and we were obviously very, very fortunate to get this group of actors to do just that.
Well, yeah. I'd like to ask Reg, Liev, and Mark if you can each tell us, sort of what first struck you about the script when you read it, and the character that you were being asked to play. Just what made this a yes for you? Rachel, can we start with you?
Yeah, I mean, I loved the script. I thought it was so compelling, and I kind of knew my way around the topic just vaguely as a concept, but I didn't really know the ins and outs, and was surprised that I didn't know more about this particular case. So, so it was just the opportunity to tell a really amazing story that I think, can't be told enough. So that's where it started for me. And then I spoke to Tom. We had a meeting, and he said, if you're on board, you can call Sasha tomorrow, and you guys can get started. That Sasha was so ready and willing and available. And so, I mean, for an actor, that's a dream come true. So.
Thanks. And Liev, you've likened the role of Marty Baron to, you said it's one of the best you've ever played. You've compared it to some of the Shakespearean parts. What is it that made it such a great role?
It's like, when you play Hamlet, everybody thinks you're smart. And so I tried to play Hamlet. and it was the same thing with Marty Baron. I don't think I've ever worked with a group of actors ever who were prouder of the people that they were playing. And I think that created an energy amongst us as actors and a generosity between us as actors and a sense of integrity that the film was giving us and that we were giving each other. And when actors work like that, it's special. And that was always Tom's design, I think. You know, I think that he, you know, because when I read the script, as I knew a little bit about the story, I thought it should be about me. I did. I thought I should have a much bigger part. And I told Tom that right away.
Actually, every actor did.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
But I realized pretty quickly we were trying to do something different. And it really helped that a large group of, we're actually old friends, most of us, so there was a shorthand. And a real, led by Tom, a real eye towards restraint and letting the story lead. And I just think the timeliness of it right now, and that we remember how important it is, in Marty's words, to hold powerful individuals and organizations accountable, and that we're losing that incredibly valuable resource. So that's why I like it.
Thank you. Mark, same question to you. I mean, it's not the first time you've played a real person, a person whose story is sort of entrusted to you. Do you like that challenge or that responsibility? How do you feel about it?
I like it. It's really you're walking a tightrope a little bit, and you have to service the integrity of the material you're working on, but you're also have the enormity of this issue, as well as another person that you're playing, and you have to do that in a way that doesn't become dead or flattened. It has to still have discovery and spontaneity, and it can't be boring. And so I don't know why I keep finding myself playing these people, and it's daunting. It's like that one more level of danger that I'm attracted to. Yeah.
So, Tom, you are also an actor or have acted. I don't know if you plan to continue. The directing thing's working out very nicely. But I guess the question for you is just, and by the way, we should note that one of your most notable roles was as a reporter on a little show called The Wire, which people may have seen. So question that I have for you is, does your background in acting, do you think it affects the way that you write characters, that you direct actors? What
He acts like a director.
Yeah, a lot of it's in the costume.
Yeah.
The way he's sitting.
I was wondering about
The way he sits.
Are the actors sitting like
we went
this?
to drama school together. He didn't used to sit like that.
It's true. It's very true. I saw Ridley Scott sitting like this the other night.
just last night.
Yeah, just last night. And he won. It's not about winning.
You and Donald Trump.
Okay. Look, one of my favorite. Look, it's a great job directing, right? For so many reasons. Big part, you get to collaborate with so many different wonderful artists, and I will admit that one of my favorite parts of the job is working with actors. And I think being an actor, I have a certain empathy for just how actors put themselves out there and what that means, and understand that the best thing I can do is enable them to do their best work and develop a language with them and with each other. And again, it's, you know, Liev brought up a word that's used a lot for this movie, which is restraint. Which I think is very accurate. But I will add to that, that only works if you have an extremely high caliber of actor. And if I use these three people on the stage, and I could go deep in the bench, right? Because we have such an incredible ensemble, including, you get deep. Once you get past the first six guys who are the reporters and editors, you get the guys like Billy Crudup, Stanley Tucci, Paul Guilfoyle, Jamie Sheridan. I mean, these guys have been working at such a high level for so long. As a director, you come to set, and every day on the call sheet, it's like, oh, this is going to be good. You know I'm going to get to. It's like playing different instruments. And it's really exciting, but it only works if these guys are so tuned in and doing what they do. So, one thing I noticed early working with Rachel is that she's just an incredible listener. And interestingly enough, so is Sasha Pfeiffer. But I watch Rachel on screen, and she's just very dialed in. And for me, you can always tell when an actor is really connected, not on what they're saying or what they're doing, but how they're listening in a scene. Liev, the wheels are spinning in his mind, you know what I mean? You can just see it. I mean, that's why he was so right for this role. He could do almost nothing, and you could see him thinking. I don't know how he does it. I watched him for, because I'm thinking all the time, and I usually look like I'm half dead. And then with Mark, it's just this like complete transformation. It's just like physical transformation. He's nothing like Mark Resendiz. And you could just see it. I would see him get to set and sort of tighten up from like the sphincter up, and I'd be like, uh-oh, here we go. And it was just really exciting to see all these guys do this. I think Mark, after he said something very interesting to me after he saw a cut of the movie, we went and had coffee across the street, and right away, we just kind of geeked out on the film for a little bit. And he was like, the most exciting thing is everyone's in a character. Everyone's playing a character. Everyone's deep. And I think that's for two reasons. One, they're very good actors. Two, they really connected with their sources. They really had that opportunity, and they took full advantage. And for some cases, they spent a lot of time with them, as Mark and Rachel did. Liev only had a couple of sit-downs with Marty before he dove in, but he just got it. So actors respond differently, and that, for me as a director, that was just really exciting to watch. So
Please.
I'm sorry, this is a reporter thing, but can I ask Liev a question? Please. Okay. And this segues off what Tom said. Rachel and I got to spend collectively a lot of time together. And only later did I realize that I was being kind of observed at the time. I thought we were kind of being social. And I realized I was being studied. And, Mark went to Mike's home. You took an iPhone video of him. You examined his bookcase. I think, Liev, you only had like 2 hours with Marty. Is that how much time he had to sit down with you?
It was approximately 2 hours, yeah.
And Marty is a pretty emotionally distant guy. He's kind of very dispassionate. He's very remote. And Marty said later that he thought Liev was frustrated because Marty sort of gave him so little. So in that little time you had with him, how did you work with it? How could you take, and you captured him so accurately, how could you with that little exposure?
There wasn't a lot going on, I just... I did what I saw. No, he's I'm so, and I got to tell you, I'm really so thrilled to consider myself a friend of Marty Barron's. He's a remarkable guy, and it's hard. Not just knowing what he's done and what he's accomplished as an editor and as a newspaperman. I could have sat with him for days. I was very self-conscious that I was wasting this incredibly important man's time. And I just sensed that as I walked into his room and he looked at me and he's like, oh, the guy from Ray Donovan is going to play me. Which I know he didn't say because he's never even heard of Ray Donovan. And we sat down, and immediately I could tell he's incredibly intelligent, Marty, and you can see it in his eyes. He works very, very quickly. Like he had assessed me in about, and accurately, I think, in probably about 15 seconds of walking in. And I watched him do that because I watch people do that. I'm accustomed to that. And I know when people are doing it well. And he did it very well because it was very subtle and it was very quick. And immediately I saw him commit to the idea, and it was like decision-making process, and it's how his brain is incredibly facile. And I saw him commit like a good decision maker. He committed immediately to total generosity because he understood that if this film had any chance of being any good, that what he had to do was give everything he knew, as honestly and as frankly as he could. And that, for me, was how I saw Marty. The language isn't as fast as the brain. So what happens is he makes decisions very, very quickly and then kind of sits in them. And people around him are shocked by the emotional content of what he's saying, but he isn't, because he's thought about it and he's made the right decision. And you can see that in him. It's immediately apparent when you meet him. And so social stuff is a little awkward, but that's because this is a guy who handles big decisions and lands on the right side of them as much as possible. And it's very difficult to live one's life like that. And it can be alienating. And so that's another part of the magnificence of Marty.
I want to.
I told you it should have been about me.
Mark, did you, in the amount of time that you spent observing Mike, was there sort of a similar essence that you quickly got at, or was there a trick into the character that you saw? Something you were able to identify?
Well, I don't know if it was evident, but they're wired very differently, Mike and Marty. So I spent a lot more time with Mike, and I really wanted to get into some of the more inner workings of Mike emotionally. I wanted to know his relationship to the church. I wanted to know his relationship to the story. I wanted to know his relationship to his work. And he didn't want to talk about any of those things. And so when you come into a person's life like that, and a person who's used to asking all the questions, and all of a sudden they're being asked all the questions, their general response is, I'm pleading the fifth. And so it took a long time, I think, for him to just feel comfortable with me. And a lot of things he wouldn't share with me, the personal stuff anyway. We had to cut a wide swath outside of that stuff. But in time, was able to glean, I felt, a lot of who he was and how his relationships to all these things were. After he saw the movie, he kind of ran out of the theater. and he saw the movie before me, by the way, which I think that was a very cool thing that you showed the reporters before you showed the actors. And Tom said he ran out. I haven't talked to him since then. So I reached out to Mike. I was like, well, and he's like, don't tell Tom this, but I thought it was great. But what's freaked me out is you captured things that I didn't tell you. I didn't want you to know, and it made me really uncomfortable. Was that?
Yeah, it's very accurate. Josh and I actually took a train up to Boston to show Sasha and the gang, and it's very weird to see a movie about you. Ask her; she's here. About yourself, and they were very quiet after for quite a long time. And Mike, who's usually very involved, right? He's pretty social, wouldn't you say, Sasha? And he's always, with Josh and I, is always the first one to say, let's go get a beer, let's talk. And no, not that night. He was just like, okay, thank you, goodbye, good work. And Josh and I were a little freaked out because we're like, they were pretty quiet for people who aren't necessarily that quiet all the time. And then they all went home. My recollection is we talked for a while. And it was good. It was obvious that they enjoyed the movie, and they all went home, and then they started writing us emails, like long emails, with their, which makes sense for them, right? And it was like Josh and I were sitting at a bar around the corner, like, well, this isn't so fun, and then we started getting the emails. It was like reviews coming in late at night, but from them. But look, I think Mike in particular And I think it's a credit to Mark because he had to get in there, and I think Mark understood it just for the few scenes. The scene that he shares with Rachel / Sasha on the porch, like it's one of the few glimpses we really have into the other side of their lives. And it's another thing about this movie which I'll point out, because I don't get a chance to do this because we're not always talking to actors, Josh and I understood earlier, and the rest of my team, creative team, understood earlier, that we were really focused on the investigation, on the work. We did not have a lot of real estate, specifically in terms of script, to linger in the personal lives of these people. And quite frankly, the story was so important, we didn't want to. We felt like people seeing this movie would be adults, and they would understand some people were married, some people weren't. Some people were good relationships, some people weren't. Some people had money, some people didn't. Who cares? This story was bigger than their personal lives. Okay, so what that means is that I need these guys to go and do their homework and bring a fully fleshed out life to the screen without us helping them in terms of a script. You understand? Like, they had to do that work, and that's another reason why I needed this particular group of actors, because I knew they would do their homework. Like, I didn't tell any of them, okay, go reach out to your counterparts. I just said, great, you're doing it, great, and they just did it. Suddenly I heard Mike's in Boston, and I'm, wow, Rachel and Sasha and Hansi are all hanging out, and it was awesome, you know, and Marty's emailing me, Liev's coming down, what should I expect, and it just happened. But beyond even the research element, these guys had to bring their personal lives to the work and find a way to incorporate that. In other words, their humanity. And that's a really tricky thing to do when the script doesn't afford you much space in that regard.
If I can just say one more thing about that. A lot of times, too, when you're playing a character where there's a big expectation, it's one of the things that I really loved about what Mark, and for that matter, Rachel, everyone in the ensemble did relatively well, very well, is when you're playing a character that there's an expectation about the person, it's important to find the thing that counters that expectation, or the things that juxtaposes it. And, you know, Mike is this tenacious reporter, and so rather than go for the heroic quality right out of the gate, sometimes it's nice to find that thing that puts the character on the back foot at the beginning. And that's one of the best compliments I think I got from Marty about all of us, was that he said that, thank God they didn't play us attractive. Which I think was smart, because it's Marty's editorial mind going, no, because it allows their situation to drive the character in the story. And so you have something to work through. And it's also something, to use Mark's phrase, that keeps you interested in the character. And to Tom's credit, a lot of that stuff was actually in the writing. That a lot of my hemming and hawing was actually very carefully scripted.
So Rachel, during the time that Sasha felt she was being observed very closely, what were your biggest takeaways? And then I'm going to ask you, Sasha, what it was like to see that reflected on the screen. But first, Rachel.
Yeah, I felt like a real creep at times. Sasha was, you know, on the internet. She was working at Boston Radio, so I could download all her interviews and listen to them in my bathroom when I was getting ready in the morning, or you know, I just sort of, you know, had that her persona out there already to follow, which was great. But then, you know, first conversation we had was, you know, an hour and a half, and but I did have to kind of keep coming back for more, because there is that thing that somehow in the middle of the conversation you realize you're being interviewed and you're no longer getting anything from them. So, but yeah, I mean, it was great that, you know, I mean, her and Hansi took me around Boston. We walked all over, and, you know, and got to have many dinners together in Toronto with everybody, and it was just really extraordinary. This just doesn't happen every day, and yeah, so it was awesome. And Tom and I talked about I don't know if you've noticed, but Sasha talks very quickly, and she's slowed everything down for all of us here. Again, it was trying to understand what that's about, and that I think your thoughts are going so fast, you know, that there's just so much to get out, and we toyed with it, but I don't know that anyone could understand what I was saying. It got to the point where it was, you know, I had to back off on that a little bit, but but you know so many things that I mean, Sasha's an extraordinary woman. You can, you know, tell that by sitting with her for a minute. But yes, just such a compassionate, open listener. You know, she was the person who got most of the stories from the survivors because they felt like they could tell her these things that, you know, were in a Pandora's box and had been locked away for so long. And you know, I just so respect that she stayed in many people's lives as well. You know, she had explained to me, you don't just walk into someone's life and ask them to turn all that up again and then walk right out as soon as you've got your soundbite or whatever. So, yeah, great deal of respect for the way you handled it, and felt very honored to play that.
So Sasha, tell us about your experience of seeing this for the first time, and then what it's been like being reunited with the other folks that you did this with, some of whom don't work at the Globe anymore, and I think you, as it was noted, I think you're elsewhere as well now, and just being back together with the crew again.
Well, I was at the Globe for about a decade. I left for 7 years to work for NPR at the Boston member station. I came back a year ago, so I am back at the Globe. We've all, I mean, the Spotlight team, we all stayed very tight. We weren't a team anymore, but we were all very close and saw each other socially, because once you've been on a team like that, it's pretty bonding. Yeah. One thing I'll add to that speech story, which I think is funny, is that Rachel had told me at one point that you consider yourself on like the slower side of talking. And so she was worried
Compared to you, yes.
And she was worried that she wouldn't be able to speak as quickly as I did. I think you were trying. And she said that finally Tom said to her, Rachel, if you speak as quickly in the movie as Sasha does in real life, no one watching the movie will understand you. And so she said that took the pressure off, and you could focus more on sort of like intonation and a little staccato. The other thing that was really interesting to me is they not only captured our mannerisms, but mannerisms we didn't always know we had. So we've told this story before, but there was a scene being filmed at Fenway Park, and we were so close to them that we could hear the dialogue because Tom and the cast gave us incredible access. I mean, I really thought we were going to be an annoyance and irritation, and they were sort of like, come in, and there were times we were ducking below cameras as they were moving by. So we're watching the scene at Fenway Park, and when Mike Resendiz gets kind of wound up, like he's about to pontificate, he does this combination like throat-clearing thing, and Mark started doing it. Yeah, that's it. And I grabbed Mike's arm, and I said, he's doing that laugh you do. And Mike said, what are you talking about? And Mike had no idea that he made that noise.
I do that. I do that laugh.
Exactly. Or when only the trailer had come out before the movie was out, my brother called me, and he said, you know, Rachel's doing like that thing you do where you put your hand on your chin on your hands, and she's doing that little thing where you kind of knock your hair out of your eyes. And I just couldn't believe that they had picked up things that little, and it was incorporated into what they were doing. It was pretty amazing.
Wow. So last question from me, and then we have a few pre-submitted questions from the audience. One of the things that people really note is how cohesive this whole huge cast is, and I just wonder, was there a lot of time for rehearsal, or what? I know it's not a huge budget, so what was available to you guys to try to get comfortable with each other? Anyone who wants to share about that? Mark?
Well, a lot of us already knew each other, so we had that going for us. But you know, Tom had the smarts to get us all together rehearsing very early on, and so we started with a lot of table work, and we did that immediately once we were cast, or once the movie went into pre-production, and then again when we got to Boston. And so I would say by the time we were shooting, we probably logged a good, I don't know, I'd say 20 hours of rehearsal time, or maybe 30 hours of rehearsal time. And it's like planting a seed. Walking in a rehearsal room and just reading through a scene one time and talking about that scene, all of a sudden that scene is growing in you. And it keeps growing in you. And when you get to finally shoot the scene, even if you only rehearsed it once, it's taken root, and it's displaying some surprising flowers or fruits that you didn't even know were there. And that's, I think that is the power of rehearsal, and we don't really do it that much. But what also happens is that you begin to build trust, and another language starts to move within the cast that transcends a verbal language. And it's a physical language. And that can only come from a kind of being relaxed and almost a playfulness, ultimately. And that comes from spending time together, meals together, bullshitting together, telling stories together. And you do enough of that, and all of a sudden there's this cohesiveness. And that's rare to work that way on a movie today. You do that in the theater. But when you see an ensemble working, essentially that communication, that nonverbal communication is happening between them. And that's what you fostered.
Yeah, it was really interesting because I think Mark's right. A bunch of them knew each other, but I don't think a lot of them had worked together. I don't know what the actual breakdown, but I know over time they were all like, yeah, we've never actually worked together. So, you put these guys in a scene together, they all respect each other. They all know each other on some level. And then they're like great musicians in a room together. And by that I mean they know when to step forward and when to step back. When to leave space and when to fill the space. And most of them, all of them really are quite comfortable in space. You think about it, we shoot this movie a lot. We kind of lay back with the camera, we let it play out. We want you to be observing it as it happened. So I'm not overly invasive with the camera, but to pull that off, I need actors who will move and be comfortable in space and who will own it. And will be comfortable with each other. So it's beyond just blocking a scene, it's living in the scene. And these guys do it in such a way that makes it look effortless. And again, it's just a very high level of work. It's just the great thing about actors.
Well, we have 3 questions that I hope I can pose to you guys from the audience. To begin with, from Christina, for each of the actors, she says, as an actor, what do you value the most in a director when you're on the set? What's most helpful to you? Rachel?
Oh, so many things. Hard to pick one. Just communication, I think. Kind of knowing what the person wants and having a dialogue. And like Mark said, that just allows you to kind of get to something on a more instinctual level, and the talking becomes a shorthand. And yeah, I think it's just, and then the trust comes and everything sort of falls into place, and Tom's sort of the best at that. He's there all the time. You're never like, where's Tom, and is he behind the monitor, and where's Video Village? Yeah, so he's right there, but not in an overbearing way, in a very like, you do your thing and I'll be right here, and you want to talk, and we can, so yeah.
Liev?
Fake enthusiasm really works well.
That's a great answer.
Look out, Ridley. No, I think I agree with everything Rachel said. I think also, I actually mean enthusiasm is a big one. You can tell, if someone's engaged in what they're doing and really engaged, and if they're passionate about it, and that just, I think that spreads very quickly.
Mark, would you add anything?
Yeah, engagement, presence, and a love. If there was one thing that I would love to have every director have is just love for us. All the time. Because like, you want to put your ass on the line as an actor. Like, you want to be vulnerable. You want to like crack open a little bit, but you also need a space to do that. And if you're feeling fear, the opposite of love is fear. And fear just sucks. Nothing good happens with fear. Running, digging, hiding, all the stuff that's not great for acting.
Tom, next.
But you.
Well-
I wish you loved us. That's all I'm saying.
Next question is for
Just
Tom.
for your next movie, you know. I'm just saying.
Next question is for Tom from Alex Castillo. The question is, what is your process when it comes to casting the secondary roles in a movie? What makes a performance for a role with one scene or a few lines stand out, in your view?
You like that, Alex. Look, movies only work if everyone's on the same page, if every performance is good. You know, it just really does. You can have this great, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lead actors, and then someone drops the ball, and you're going to lose your audience. And with a film like this, you cannot afford to lose your audience. So the casting is so crucial. Everyone has to be right. And this, I will say, is the largest cast I've ever had to deal with. I felt like I feel like I'm still casting this movie. It never ended. Like every night I'd go home, they're like, you need 3 more roles. I'd be like, oh my God, who? But it was also really exciting. And that only works if the ensemble if the ensemble is generous, if the cast is generous, if they keep bringing people in, immediately making them feel. You have someone comes in for literally 2 lines. You have the receptionist at the desk, right? You have someone like Jimmy LeBlanc, who plays Patrick McSorley, okay, who's a Boston actor out of Southie, hasn't done a lot. And he had those scenes with Mark and Stanley in The Office specifically. That's a great series where he's one of the first of the survivors to talk. Now, throwing an actor who hasn't done a lot into a scene with Mark Ruffalo and Stanley Tucci, that would make me nervous.
It's just mean.
Yeah, it's mean. Yeah.
That's not love.
Yeah.
That's the opposite of love, Tom.
That is the opposite of love.
You know my love.
It was so unloving. I gotta call that dude. No, but those guys understand that, and Jimmy comes in and just kind of kills it. And like after, really, we shot him first, and we're all like, okay, that can happen. That great scene where Robbie goes down to Providence, where Michael Keaton goes down to Providence and interviews. It's a really small scene. He basically says, "I got to talk to you about Father Backwin," and he gets really upset and says, "I haven't even told my wife." I mean, that guy we cast out of Rhode Island. He's a dentist. And he's an actor, and he was terrific. And we shot that. I said, "You want me to shoot Michael or you first?" He's like, "No, shoot me first if you don't mind." And he did it, and the same thing. Keaton was just like, "Whoa, okay." And I think we did like 2 takes and we were done because we just did this slow push on him, no coverage. I didn't have to fool around. He was great, and as a filmmaker, you really live or die by those performances. I know these guys are going to deliver. I know one way or another they're going to deliver. It's a lot of people I'm meeting for the first time, or I don't have the experience with, or they haven't performed a lot. I don't know that. So you really got to get that right.
Last question is for each person up here, so if you can each, just kind of give a succinct answer to this. It's a tough question. It's from Lauren Bray saying, "For me, I have a strong Catholic family background, and seeing this movie really changed my perspective of the church. How many of you are Catholic yourselves, and did any of you find conflict within yourself or amongst family and friends after doing the research and making the film?" So, Sasha, we see some of your family situation in the film, but what is it, as you look back at this whole experience, how has it affected your faith? If it's not too personal a question.
I have a Catholic mom and a Protestant dad, so I had a double dose of religion, basically, 2 perspectives. I mean, for me, after you've seen what was in those file cabinets in the Boston Archdiocese, it was hard to feel the same way about the church, I mean, for me, it's tough because when my mom comes to town for Christmas, she all wants us to go to church together. I have my little dilemma about whether do you just do it for mom, or are you violating some eternal principle if you do it? And I haven't totally resolved that yet, but it's been tough.
Rachel.
I grew up Protestant, so I didn't have that same Catholic connection, but definitely I remember, having this conversation with Tom one of the first times we met when we were finally shooting in Toronto and saying, I feel kind of nervous. I feel nervous about this. I feel nervous about going after faith. I do. There is a conflict there, and I believed in the movie 100%, but there's no way to avoid that entirely, and which I think is good. I think it's good to keep that in mind too. And I just love that, you know, Tom looked at how we were all complicit, you know, just how it creeps in and it can be so insidious and, you know, for the best of everyone's intentions. So, yeah.
Liev.
I had a pretty ecumenical upbringing, so never took anything too seriously. But I think my favorite moment in the movie, and I told Tom this when I read it, was that he included the Richard Sipe, and you'll maybe have the quote in your head, Tom, because I can't remember it, but when Mike asks, you know what I'm talking about? When Mike asks Sipe, and Sipe is this really phenomenal guy who spent all of this time researching this really big problem, and he's a priest, ex-priest. And Mike says to him, how do you
keep your faith?
And do you remember what he said? I can't remember. Do you remember the quote? He says something like, the guy's still a Catholic. And he says, well, I believe in a higher power, and this is an institution. My faith is not. That's right, institution of men, and I
believe in God.
That's
and this
right.
is an institution of men.
And I just, that for me was a very powerful thing to keep in the script. And I just told Tom that when I read it.
Mark.
Yeah, you're confronting something that can be really shattering for folks who get a lot of faith or a lot of comfort from a faith, but it's well within the realm of the teachings of Christ to confront the very things that we're confronting. And so I see it as a kind of correction for the church and a way for the church to become a more healthy place for people ultimately. You can't carry around this kind of darkness and secret and expect something beautiful to grow from it. It's rotten. And that rot has got to be excavated. It has to be cleared out, you know, for healing to happen. And so I understand it's incredibly confrontational, but at the same time, you have to remember the people who are hurt, and you have to honor those people, and then only then can you truly be a faith of love, or what Catholicism espouses, and to follow those teachings. Other than that, it just doesn't have the same kind of meaning. So that was my relationship to it.
Thanks. Tom, can you close us out?
Sure, yeah. Look, I was raised Catholic. I was an altar boy. It's part of the reason I wanted to tell this story. My family is still very Catholic. Brothers and sisters, mother, very committed to the church, and they're very excellent people. And there's a lot of great Catholics, and it's a wonderful community. They do a lot of good. And I think, one of the most exciting elements, the scene Liev's talking about, actually my brother John saw an early cut of the movie, and the phrase Sipe uses in that is called the passing, which he's committed to the eternal and not so much the institution, which is fallible because it's human. And I think it's a very beautiful idea, and my brother John saw that, and he's like, that's what I've been looking for. That terminology to kind of raise my kids in a church that I still want them to have some sense of faith and spirituality. And it was a really interesting discussion, but I think for all of us involved with the movie, and I mean all of us, I think one of the most exciting aspects has not just been the response from audiences. Obviously, we've done very well, and critically we've done well, and now in this crazy award season, it's gone very well, but really, except for last night when I didn't win anything. Damn it, I can't believe I said that. It's okay, Tom Ortenberg. But I think one of the best things has been the response from the Catholic community, which has been incredibly positive. The outreach, both on an institutional level and personal level, has been incredibly positive and engaging, encouraging people to see the movie, to discuss it. And that says to me that a lot of people within the church now are forward-thinking, they're inclusive, they recognize this is not just was a problem, but is a problem that has to be dealt with for the good work that Mark talks about to continue to be done. And for all of us, I think that's like the happy ending that we all hope for with this story in terms of the response to the movie. And it's pretty much why we tell stories, not to answer questions, but to raise them and to raise dialogue and to get people talking. And I think I can tell you now, one of the best things I keep hearing about this film is people say we see the film and we walk home talking about it. We go out to dinner and we talk about it. The next day we want to talk about it. I think I speak for all of us when I say that's why we do this.
Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming out.
Thank you so much.